All right, good morning and welcome to the year-end patching webinar. So this today we're going to have Desi Howes, who is one of our senior consultants, present some year-end patching tips and tricks and bits of knowledge that you might want to know, something specific to this year, hopefully, and then just in general, what's involved in doing some year-end patching. It's going to be a relatively short webinar. We'll leave times for a question and answer at the end. If you're one of our managed service customers, I see some of you online here. Just know that the year-end patching is already kind of part of your managed service agreement, so that's not something you need to kind of do. We're doing that for you essentially. Um, and Yeah, with that, Desi, can you let's make sure we can hear you.
Yes, can you hear me?
Oh, perfect. Great. So I'll put myself on mute here and have Desi continue from here on. Thanks, Desi.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Like Tan said, I'm Desi. I'm a technical consultant with Nogalis, and I just want to give you guys a few tips on the year-end regulatory patching released by Infor this year. As you probably know, they release regulatory patches at the end of every year that keep you in compliance with your things such as 1099 reporting or ACA reporting. This year, the patches, the reason this webinar is pretty short is that the patches are not that big this year. There's not a huge amount of changes. So, of course, that's actually good news, I'm sure. So we just want to go over a few tips for installing the 2019 patches. So today we'll discuss the timelines for the release of the patches and the documentation, where you can get the documentation and what documentation you'll need, actually downloading the patches and reviewing the change reports to help facilitate your testing. We'll do a little high-level review of the installation and some tips for actually testing the patches this year. So typically what Infor does is at the end of November, they will release a KB article, and that KB article is like your one-stop shop for the dates and the documentation that you're going to need for that year-end patching. So what you can do is you can, at the end of November, you can go and find that KB article and follow it so that anytime they make a change to it, you'll get notified. And additionally, if you're sign up for notifications, patch notifications on Infor Extreme, which I recommend, then you'll also get an email whenever the patches are actually available. So that's at the end of November when they kind of get the process started. And then the actual downloads are going to be available typically at the beginning of December. I think it was the 3rd or the 5th this year that they were ready. And that's when the install files will be ready. And then the PDF documentation and the change documentation is going to be available at that time. Whenever you are going to get the documentation or search for the KB articles, I recommend logging into Infor Extreme and go to search for articles and documentation. Make sure you're searching both because they will have PDF documents as well as KB articles available. And you want to make sure that you're sorting by date. And then that way when you search for 2019 year-end or next year 2020 year-end, everything's going to pop up at the top for you that's available at that time. To actually download the patches, there is a KB article that will point you in the right direction for downloading the patches and what the patch names are going to be. And it's always going to be the same, basically. You go to the downloads in Infor Extreme and the products menu and Lawson applications. And then Lawson applications, regulatory releases. And then these are the file names that are available right now, the tar files. So you only need to download what products you actually use. So if you don't run benefits out of Lawson, then you're not going to need to download the benefits patch. So just keep that in mind. And then for the changes, so once you get your tar files, you're going to want to unpack them. And then inside of there's going to be 2 HTML documents. One of them is a Delta README, and the other one is a regular README file. So the delta is just like the major changes. It's like a one-page, very high-level view of what has changed in this patch. And then the regular README file is more detailed. So I recommend reviewing both of those. You want to look through those, and some things that you want to be aware of specifically. You want to look for any job parameter changes, and they're pretty good in the description of telling you if a patch is changing job parameters on a form, on a batch job, and if it's going to require you to create a new batch job. Because, you know, if they add parameters on a batch job and it moves the fields around a little bit, then your parameters could be off once the patch is installed. So you may need to create a brand new batch job with new parameters. In this case, the documentation stated that the AP245, AP145, and AP146 jobs will all have to be recreated because of parameter changes. So if you use any of those forms, you'll want to look at them closely whenever you go to test them. I went through and checked on those forms myself, and I definitely saw the changes on the 245 and the 145, but the 146, I didn't actually see any changes, so you may not actually have to change that one, but just keep in mind that Infor said that there were parameter changes on it, so just keep an eye on it if you do use that form. And then other things that they do with patches sometimes is they add fields to a form, or they might change the interface file. They might add a column to an interface conversion file, or in this case, this year, the AP520 output, the actual CSV file that comes out of the AP520 job, they added a column to that and moved a couple of the columns around. But I've got a couple of clients who have already tested it, and they said that the data is still the same, and you know, everything, it doesn't really change the content of the file. It's just that they moved some things around. So something to keep in mind. It doesn't look like they've added any new fields to forms this year, but just make sure that you're aware of that and looking for that, because if they do, that could impact your add-ins, queries, and uploads. So if there are new fields added to forms, you want to go in, and if you have any uploads or queries against those forms, you're going to want to go in and make sure that those are still working. And then another way to search for any database changes is to look in your README files for DB reorg. And anything that requires a DB reorg means that the structure of the database has changed, and you'll want to keep those in mind, especially if you run queries against the database or have any IPA processes interfacing with the database. And then, again, no new forms this time, but if there are ever new forms, you want to be aware of that. If your organization is going to use a new form that they've added, then you'll want to apply security rules to that form. So like I said, the AP145 changes, they were relatively minor. It's just the dividend tab that's changed. They've added a few boxes, but you can see, like, the top one is the current AP145 and the bottom one is after patching. So those, if you have those boxes filled in on your current AP145 job, then you know things are going to get moved around on after the patch is done. So you're going to want to really look at those and make sure all your boxes are set up correctly. And then the AP245 was probably the biggest change that I saw. The old form has just the main tab and the merchant group tab, and the new one has these new tabs in the middle, and they moved some of the fields from the main tab off main and into the other tabs. So if you do use this report, you're definitely going to need to go in and update your parameters, or maybe even it would be a better idea just to create a brand new batch job with a different name for this one. So just a high-level installation tips. These are just regular CTPs. So you're going to use your WAP Install command to preview, update, and activate. You'll download all your patches, unpack them. You'll do a preview and an update on each patch. And then at the very end of it, you'll finally do the activate. The activate is the last step, and it activates all of the patches at the same time. And as you can see in the first image here, the only patch that seemed to need a DB reorg was the benefits one. So if you're doing that one, you definitely need to be aware that you're going to have to do a DB reorg for that one. But that's it. And if you guys have any questions on how to do WAP install, of course you can email us, but we also have a really good article that on our website that takes you step by step of how to do a CTP with WAP install. And then we also did a webinar a couple of years ago with a step-by-step tips for how to do patches and even revert patches. And at the end of this webinar, I'll give you guys links to both of those, the webinar and the article. So for testing, so some of the changes, if you look in the READMEs, you'll see that some of the changes are actually either a minor enhancement or a minor fix for a bug. So you're going to kind of want to do not just annual processing, you're going to want to test like several different types of processing just to make sure that nothing has been impacted by the changes. So you do a little bit of daily processing, inquiring on forms, running a couple of daily batch jobs. You'll definitely want to process payroll and check and make sure that like the taxes are calculated correctly and do some data validation there, that the benefits are deducted correctly. And then do a month-end process if possible. And then obviously the name of the game in this case is the annual processing. So you'll definitely want, if you run 1099s out of Lawson, you'll want to do those and do data validation on those, W-2s, and then your Affordable Care Act reporting for sure. And then, like I said, in the HTML documentation and the README docs, it does say everything that has changed. So if you see any bugs that were fixed or enhancements that were done to forms that you use, then you'll want to go ahead and make sure that you specifically test those forms for that the item that they're fixing so that you can make sure that it is fixed and that it hasn't broken anything else. So those are the basics. Like I said, it's a pretty short one. So do you guys have any questions? You can just put your questions in the chat.
Yeah, so the attendee chat feature is on the left side, I believe. It's hard when you're not an attendee to find out where it is again. But there should be a button near the top also that says questions. Okay, so it looks like, do you know about the W-4 changes? When will they be released?
I would recommend going to the Infor Extreme. I didn't specifically see those yet, so.
Yeah, the KB article should have should be updated when those get posted. They don't really give any sort of guidance as to like when they're going to release them a lot of times, and even if they do, it's not something you want to kind of depend on. But I believe they come out like early January usually.
Yeah, I'm not seeing anything just yet.
And then we'll have this webinar recorded and we'll post it on our site, and we'll send you guys emails with a copy of this presentation deck, link to the video, and links that Desi mentioned from past articles will also be in that email. So if you have any questions, you can always respond to that email with your questions. You can go and search our site for those articles anytime. There's nothing to sign up for. Here are those links. So we'll send you those. You don't have to write them down right now. And let's see. Uh, Other ways to contact us, you can just go on our site and call the 800 number, or you can use the contact us form there, or you could just, our emails are our first names. So it's just Desi at Nogalis.com, DESI at Nogalis.com, and Tan at Nogalis.com, TAN, like the color at Nogalis.com. and those will get directly to us. If you have any questions about this or any other thing, we're more than happy to answer. Hopefully, you enjoyed this webinar, and hopefully, it was of some help to you. And join us again for the next one whenever we do that. You should, if you're subscribed to our mailing list, you'll get notifications on when they get posted. We're planning to do one, I believe, in the third week of January. So we'll post the topic soon and we'll email you about it. Again, have a great day and thank you for joining.